My friends, there are seasons along the spiritual path when everything in the outer world appears to go dim. Your prayers seem to rise into silence, your faith stretches thin, and you wonder whether God has withdrawn himself from your experience. Yet I say to you, God has never withdrawn. The presence has never diminished. What has been happening in those hours of darkness is not abandonment, but preparation. The soul is being readied for a deeper recognition of the kingdom that has always been within. Many of you have walked through such nights. You have remained faithful when there was nothing in the outer world to confirm your faithfulness. You prayed when no answer came. You trusted when no evidence supported trust. You waited when waiting felt unbearable. And yet, something in you kept you from turning away. Something held you steady. That something was not human strength. It was the invisible activity of the Spirit moving silently within your own consciousness. You see, the darkness is not a mistake in your journey. It is a necessary part of it. Every soul that awakens must come to the end of depending upon the outer world for assurance, for safety, for direction. And the only way this dependency is dissolved is through a period in which the outer world fails to supply what you once relied upon. In that moment, you are being invited gently, though it may not feel gentle, to look within, to discover the source you have always had but perhaps never known intimately. So I say to you today, if you have endured such a season, if you have been faithful when all was dark, understand that you were not waiting for God. God was waiting for you, waiting for the moment when you would cease looking outward and become still enough to recognize the presence already within your own being. The silence you experienced was not the absence of God. It was the quieting of everything that keeps you from hearing God. And now, because you have stayed faithful, you stand at the threshold of something new, not as a reward, not as compensation, but as the natural next step in your unfoldment. For the kingdom of God, which has never been separate from you, is preparing to reveal itself not as a promise for some distant day, but as the living reality of your own consciousness. Remain open, and you will see that what appeared to be darkness was merely the night before dawn. Let us look more deeply now at why these periods of darkness precede spiritual illumination. It may seem, from a human standpoint, that something has gone wrong, that God has stepped away, or that your spiritual practice has somehow failed. But this is never the case. There is no place where God is not. There is no moment in which the presence withdraws. What does withdraw is your reliance upon appearances, your dependence upon the outer world to sustain you, guide you, or reassure you. That is what fades. And as it fades, you may interpret the fading as darkness. But the darkness is only the dissolving of a false sense of self. You see, we have been conditioned for lifetimes to believe that safety lies in circumstances, that supply is measured by accounts, that harmony depends upon other people behaving harmoniously. And as long as we believe these things, we cannot behold the kingdom. For the kingdom is not in conditions. The kingdom is not in form. The kingdom is not in what comes and goes. The kingdom is a state of consciousness, a recognition of the presence that is already complete. Before that recognition dawns, the old foundation must give way, not because God tears it down, but because you have outgrown it. The soul is ready to move into a higher understanding, and when the soul is ready, the structures of fear and separation must fall. Their falling is what you have called darkness. This is why every mystic, every sincere seeker, every student of spiritual truth has known a time when God seemed absent. Yet God was never absent, only the belief in separation was being stripped away. The silence you heard was not divine rejection. It was the mind losing its dependence on outer reassurance so that inner recognition could emerge. In those moments, you were being invited to discover something entirely new, that you do not need a sign or a circumstance or an answered prayer to know God. You need only awareness. You need only stillness. You need only the quiet recognition that the life, the love, the intelligence you seek is already the substance of your being. So the darkness precedes illumination not as punishment, not as trial, but as the gentle removal of everything that prevents you from seeing what has always been true. The night comes because the dawn is near. The silence comes because a deeper hearing is opening. The emptiness comes because fullness is ready to reveal itself. When you understand this, you no longer fear the dark. You no longer resist the silence. You no longer panic when the outer seems to fall away. You recognize that every dissolution is clearing the space for something higher, something purer, something truer. And that something is the kingdom within you, preparing to shine. Now we come to a truth that must be understood if you are to recognize what is unfolding within you. During those periods when you felt nothing, heard nothing, and saw no sign of progress, something was growing beneath the surface of your awareness. Something invisible, yet profoundly real. The kingdom of God was not approaching you from the outside, it was rising within your consciousness. The spiritual life does not develop through outer events. It develops through inner preparation, inner stillness, inner receptivity. And much of this development occurs without your conscious cooperation. While you were waiting, while you were questioning, while you were hoping for an answer from without, the Spirit was quietly deepening itself within. This is why you may look back on those dark seasons and realize that you emerged wiser than you entered. You emerged softer, more compassionate, more willing to release control. You emerged with a capacity to surrender that you did not have before. These qualities are not accidental. They are the early signs of the kingdom's dawning. For the kingdom of God is not a place to which you travel. It is not a condition that appears once the world rearranges itself. It is not a future reward granted to you after years of effort. The kingdom is your own awakened consciousness. It is the awareness of the presence that has always lived at the center of your being. And it was this awareness that was quietly forming in you during the silence. Just as a seed germinates in the dark earth before any green leaf breaks through the soil, so the kingdom germinates in the unseen depths of consciousness before any outward transformation appears. You thought nothing was happening because you were observing only the outer, but all the while, the inner was preparing to reveal its light. The qualities that were forming within you, patience, humility, trust, surrender, were not human virtues you were trying to cultivate. They were spiritual capacities awakening by themselves as you became less dependent on the visible and more open to the invisible. You were being made ready, not through effort, but through the gentle dissolving of that which could not recognize the kingdom. Understand this. You have not been progressing toward God. God has been unfolding himself through you. What seemed like waiting was actually ripening. What seemed like darkness was actually gestation. What seemed like emptiness was actually space being cleared for recognition. The kingdom has always been present within you, but until now, it could not be seen. Your faithfulness has thinned the veil. Your endurance has opened the inner ear. Your surrender has softened the mind. And now, the light that was hidden, the truth that was veiled, the presence that was silent, is preparing to reveal itself as your own consciousness. You have not been forgotten. You have been prepared. There comes a moment, often so gentle you scarcely notice it at first, when the inner shift begins. It does not come with flashes of light or thunder. or sudden dramatic visions. It comes quietly, naturally, as if something you have always known but long forgotten is suddenly remembered, and this remembering is the beginning of spiritual illumination. The world has taught you to look for revelation, to wait for signs, to expect some outward confirmation that God has finally spoken. But the kingdom does not reveal itself through outward phenomenon. It reveals itself through recognition, through the silent awareness that the presence you sought is already within you, already functioning as your very life, already the essence of your being. This recognition is subtle. It is not a thought you try to hold, nor a belief you attempt to strengthen. It is a simple knowing, a quiet assurance that rises without effort. You may not even call it spiritual at first. You may simply feel a release, a softening, a sense that you no longer have to struggle. The mind stops grasping, the heart stops pleading, and something deeper than the mind begins to take its rightful place. In that moment, you turn from asking to resting, from striving to allowing, from seeking God as an external power to recognizing God as the substance of your own consciousness. This is the moment Joel Goldsmith called the shift from prayer to realization. It is the moment when you cease attempting to influence God and instead become aware of the God that has never stopped influencing you. You begin to see that your prayers for things, your prayers for change, your prayers for rescue were all based on the belief that God was outside, and that belief made you blind to the truth. Recognition dissolves that blindness. You may notice this shift in small ways. A problem that once caused fear no longer holds the same power. A situation that once demanded urgent control now invites stillness. An old pattern of anxiety suddenly feels unfamiliar, as if it belongs to someone you used to be. These small signs are more significant than any miracle, for they reveal that consciousness itself is changing, and when consciousness changes, the entire world must eventually reflect that change. Revelation belongs to the mind. Recognition belongs to the soul. Revelation is something the mind hopes for. Recognition is something the soul already knows. This shift is the true beginning of your awakening, not because God has finally arrived, but because you have finally become aware. The dawn does not come because the night ended. The dawn comes because the light was always present, waiting only for your eyes to see. So when you sense this inner shift, this quiet recognition, do not try to hold it, do not attempt to deepen it, do not analyze it, simply rest in it, allow it to unfold. For this recognition is the very doorway through which the kingdom enters your experience, not by descending from above, but by rising from within. When you come through a season of spiritual darkness, you may imagine that you have merely endured something, but you have done far more than endure. You have been prepared. You have been made ready for a new way of living, a new relationship to God, and a new understanding of yourself. Your faithfulness in the dark has not earned you anything, for God cannot be earned, but it has opened in you the capacity to recognize what has always been present. There are 3 gifts that silently form within the soul during these difficult seasons. They do not appear through effort. They do not arise from discipline. They arise because the human sense of dependence weakens, and the spiritual sense of identity begins to emerge. The first gift is the capacity to be still in the presence of appearances. Before the darkness, every disturbance in the outer world compelled reaction, fear, planning, resistance, escape. But in the darkness, when reaction no longer produced results, something in you grew quiet. You learned, without realizing it, to pause. That pause is not human restraint. It is spiritual readiness. It is the soul learning to turn within instead of lunging outward. This stillness becomes the foundation for spiritual perception, for only a still mind can recognize the presence. The second gift is the capacity to recognize instead of treat. In the human approach, you treat a problem because you believe in the problem. You affirm health because you fear disease. You speak abundance because you believe in lack. You pray for peace because turmoil seems real, but in the darkness, when the old treatments no longer comforted you, when affirmations felt hollow, when efforts to change conditions collapsed, something deeper awakened. You began, however, faintly to sense that the truth you seek is not something you create. It is something you acknowledge. This is recognition. This is the turning from effect to cause, from appearance to reality. The third gift is the capacity to live by grace rather than by effort. In the old consciousness, life depended upon your ability to manage, control, and force outcomes. But in the dark night, when nothing responded to human effort, you tasted the futility of struggle. And in that quiet surrender, grace began to flow. Not as a feeling, not as a miracle, but as a subtle shift, actions arising naturally instead of anxiously, decisions forming gently instead of fearfully, ideas appearing without strain. This is the emergence of divine activity. This is grace beginning to govern your experience. What you thought was a desert was the place where these capacities formed. What you thought was barrenness was the soil in which these gifts rooted themselves. What you thought was silence was the presence working beneath the surface. Now you stand at the threshold of a new spiritual life, not because you have become stronger, but because you have become receptive, not because you have achieved something, but because you have surrendered something. And this receptivity is the only requirement for the kingdom to reveal itself. For the kingdom does not respond to force, it responds to openness. And your faithfulness in the dark has opened you. So do not look back at that season with regret or fear or confusion. It was not wasted. It was not meaningless. It was not empty. It was preparation. It was the Spirit removing your reliance on what cannot sustain you, so that you might finally recognize what has been sustaining you since the beginning. You are ready now not because of what you have done, but because of what you have allowed. Now we turn to the sacred process through which the kingdom that has been forming within you begins to express itself outwardly, not as magic, not as sudden dramatic intervention, but as the natural unfoldment of spiritual consciousness. When consciousness changes, experience must change, not because you have manipulated the outer world, but because the outer world has no choice but to align with the inner. The kingdom does not break open through effort. It unfolds through awareness. It reveals itself to the degree that you cease giving power to appearances. It begins to express itself the moment you recognize that the source of all harmony, all supply, all peace, all wholeness is already functioning within you. This is the great mystery that the human mind cannot understand. Outer conditions are not the cause of your experience. Consciousness is. And when consciousness is illumined, the outer begins to adjust without strain, without willpower, without the anxiety of human effort. Consider this. When you recognize that supply is the nature of divine consciousness, you no longer chase after supply. You no longer panic over the lack of it. And as that fear dissolves, avenues of provision appear naturally not as miracles, but as the outer echo of an inner reality already established. Or consider health. When you stop fighting disease as though it possesses power, and instead recognize the wholeness of divine life as the truth of your being, something subtle happens. The fear that sustained the condition weakens. The sense of separation that created suffering loosens. And gradually, Sometimes quietly, the body responds to the spiritual fact rather than to the material appearance. Or consider relationships. When you cease trying to fix, persuade, or change another, and instead rest in the awareness that the same divine presence that lives in you lives in them, harmony begins to reveal itself where conflict once reigned. Not because the other person has changed, but because you have stopped relating from personality and begun relating from consciousness. This unfolding occurs without effort because truth is self-executing. The kingdom does not need your strength. It needs your recognition. Think of the sun rising. The sun does not rush. It does not struggle. It does not push away the darkness. It simply reveals itself, and the darkness disappears of its own nature. In the same way, when the light of spiritual awareness dawns within you, the shadows of fear, lack, conflict, and confusion dissolve not through battle, but through absence of belief in their reality. This is why Goldsmith taught that problems are not to be solved, they are to be seen through. The kingdom does not break in by destroying appearances. It breaks in by removing your faith in appearances. The moment you cease granting power to what the senses report, you make room for reality to reveal itself. So the true unfoldment of the kingdom is not an event, it is a shift in identity. You stop living as a human being trying to reach God, and you begin living as a spiritual being through whom God expresses. You stop looking outward for support, and you begin resting inwardly in the presence, that is, support itself. You stop seeking effects, conditions, outcomes, and you begin seeking first, recognizing the invisible cause behind all visible form. And as this recognition deepens, you will find that life opens in ways you did not plan and could not have forced. Opportunities appear without your pursuit. Solutions arise without your analysis. Peace becomes your atmosphere rather than your goal, and the outer world, which once demanded constant management, begins to flow of its own accord. This is the natural order of spiritual living. This is the gentle breaking open of the kingdom, not through struggle, but through surrender, not through effort, but through awareness, not through asking God to act, but through recognizing that God is already acting as your own consciousness. As the kingdom begins to unfold within you, it becomes essential to establish a way of living that supports this new consciousness, not through discipline, not through obligation, not through spiritual performance, but through simple recognition, moment by moment, day by day. For illumination is not sustained by the intensity of your effort. It is sustained by the constancy of your awareness. There are practices, not as techniques to gain something, but as reminders of what is already present. These practices do not bring God to you. They bring you into conscious union with God. They shift your attention from the outer world of appearances to the inner world of reality. The first practice is the pause. Before you react to anything, before you answer the message, before you respond to the fear, before you judge the condition, pause. That pause is not merely a moment of silence. It is a moment of remembrance. It is the instant in which you turn from the appearance to the presence. Without a single word, without a thought, you simply rest in the awareness. God is here. This pause breaks the momentum of the conditioned mind and opens the door to spiritual perception. The second practice is the inner statement, not as affirmation, but as recognition. I and the Father are one. The kingdom of God is within me. Divine presence is the reality of my being. These words are not used to persuade the mind. They are used to acknowledge what is eternally true. They are reminders not requests, recognitions, not treatments. And as these recognitions arise within you, they shift the center of your identity from the human self to the spiritual self that is one with God. The third practice is the stillness of listening. Set aside a few minutes each day, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, even 60 seconds to sit in quiet awareness without asking for anything. This is Goldsmith's meditation of listening. You are not trying to achieve silence. The silence is already present. You are simply becoming aware of it. And in that awareness, the activity of the spirit begins to move without interference. This stillness becomes the resting place of your soul. The fourth practice is non-reaction. When a problem appears, the human impulse is to resist it, fight it, or immediately attempt to correct it. But non-reaction does not deny the appearance, it simply refuses to give it power. You let the appearance be what it is, while you rest in the truth that divine consciousness alone is the governing power. This non-reaction dissolves the belief in two powers and restores your awareness of the one presence, the one law, the one life. The fifth practice is living by grace, not by effort. This is perhaps the most transformative shift. Rather than planning every detail, rather than pushing outcomes, rather than controlling circumstances, you learn to move as you are moved. You allow divine intelligence to guide your decisions, your actions, your conversations, and you will find that life becomes simpler, not because conditions are perfect, but because you are no longer trying to perfect them through human will. These practices are not to be forced. They are to be gently remembered. You will not do them perfectly, and perfection is not required. What matters is sincerity, openness, and the willingness to turn inward again and again throughout the day. In time, you will find that recognition becomes natural. The pause becomes reflexive. The inner statement arises without being summoned. Stillness appears in the midst of activity. Grace begins to lead where effort once dominated. And the kingdom becomes not something you seek, but the atmosphere in which you live. This is the new way of living, not striving to bring God into your life, but recognizing that God is your life. Not attempting to manifest good, but discovering the good that has always been present. Not leaning on the outer world for stability, but resting in the inner world where stability never changes. Recognition, practiced gently and consistently, becomes the way consciousness stays aligned with its source. And as you continue in these practices, the unfoldment of the kingdom becomes inevitable. As recognition becomes a living rhythm within you, life begins to unfold in a way that is gentle, natural, and often surprising. The new consciousness does not announce itself with fanfare. It does not force itself upon you. It simply begins to express quietly and effortlessly through every area of your experience. You do not create this new life. You witness it. You do not shape it. You allow it. For the kingdom expresses itself without human manipulation. The first sign you may notice is a subtle clarity, a sense of inner order that does not come from your thoughts, but from somewhere deeper. Situations that once confused you now appear simpler. Decisions that once burdened you now arise naturally. You find yourself knowing without thinking, acting without anxiety, speaking without rehearsing. This is the movement of grace. This is divine intelligence flowing through the consciousness that is open to receive it. Another sign is that fear begins to lose its foundation. It may still whisper, but it no longer commands your obedience. You begin to see fear as a shadow, nothing more, and the light of presence is the only true substance. Circumstances may not change immediately, but your relationship to them does. You face situations that once overwhelmed you with a steadiness that surprises even you, and this steadiness is not your personal strength. It is the stability of God realized within. You will also notice that relationships begin to shift, not because others have changed, but because you no longer relate to them from the level of personality. You begin to see the divine within them, even when they do not see it themselves. And this recognition changes the atmosphere. Conflicts that once escalated now dissolve. Misunderstandings that once lingered now soften. Some relationships will deepen, others will quietly fall away. All of it occurs without resistance because your sense of identity is no longer tied to outer approval. Supply, too, begins to flow differently. Instead of struggling for provision, you observe how naturally resources appear when needed. A door opens, a message arrives, an opportunity presents itself without your pursuit. This is not because you have mastered manifestation. It is because you have stopped interfering. Divine supply has always been present. Only fear obscured it. When fear dissolves, supply becomes visible. Health may also reflect this inward shift. You may notice the body responding to peace, to rest, to the awareness of wholeness. Healing becomes less about battling a condition and more about releasing the belief that the condition holds power. The body is not your life. Life flows through the body. And as you abide in the awareness of that life, the body naturally aligns with the harmony of the consciousness that animates it. Perhaps the greatest change you will experience is an inner quiet, a peace that does not depend on circumstance. This peace becomes the atmosphere of your being. You carry it into your work, into your home, into your interactions. It becomes your companion. It becomes your foundation. This peace does not eliminate challenges. It transforms your approach to them. You no longer seek rescue from the outer world. You rest in the inner presence that has already overcome the world. This is the new life that emerges not through miracles, not through dramatic interventions, but through the gradual unveiling of what has always been true. You are not becoming spiritual. You are discovering your spirituality. You are not achieving enlightenment. You are awakening to the light that has always been within. The kingdom does not come from above. It rises from within. And so, as this new consciousness stabilizes, you begin to realize something profound. Your life is no longer something you must manage. Your path is no longer something you must force. Your future is no longer something you must fear, for the presence that lives you, guides you, sustains you, expresses as you, has taken its rightful place in your awareness. Now you live not by human effort, but by divine unfoldment, not by anxious striving, but by spiritual assurance, not by controlling life, but by participating in its grace. This is the life that emerges when the kingdom within you breaks open, and it comes not because you have earned it, but because you have recognized it. And now, as we bring this message to its close, let us return to the beginning, the season of darkness, the long silence, the inner struggle that brought you here. You may have believed that nothing was happening in those hours. You may have felt abandoned, forgotten, left to navigate the night alone. But now you see what truly occurred. Your faithfulness was not unnoticed. Your faithfulness was the very door through which the kingdom could enter your awareness. Every moment you refused to surrender to despair, every moment you continued seeking when you felt nothing, every moment you turned toward God instead of away, these moments formed the opening, the space, the inner receptivity that allowed the presence to reveal itself. You were not waiting for God. God was waiting for you to be still enough to hear, open enough to receive, empty enough to recognize. What you thought was endurance was actually transformation. What you thought was silence was preparation. What you thought was delay was the dissolving of everything that stood between you and the awareness of the kingdom within. And so I say to you now, your faithfulness has not earned the kingdom, for the kingdom has never been withheld from you. But your faithfulness has prepared you for the recognition of what has always been yours. Do not look back with regret on the darkness. It brought you here. Do not judge the silence. It opened your inner ear. Do not fear the unknown. You are no longer walking from the old consciousness. You are walking from the presence that now lives consciously in you. From this moment on, let your life be guided not by effort, but by awareness. Not by fear, but by trust. Not by appearances, but by the presence that stands behind appearances. Let the kingdom continue to unfold in your stillness, in your recognition, in your quiet willingness to turn within again and again. This is the path. This is the truth. This is the life. And you, who have remained faithful in the night, now awaken to the dawn that was being prepared for you all along. Rest in this truth. The kingdom is within you. It is complete. It is whole. It is here. And it is yours by divine right of being. May the peace of this recognition go with you, guide you, sustain you, and express itself through every moment of your unfolding life.